Hello, everybody. Welcome to my channel. Let's go on. When we read aloud, we often mispronounce individual words. Why does this happen? According to Freud, such as slaves reveal underlying motives. For example, if a leader announcing the opening of a conference accidentally says, I now declare the meeting adjourned, it must indicate that the leader disliked the tedious formalities and subconsciously wishes for the meeting to end. While this interpretation is often correct, it can occasionally be arbitrary. According to Ju theory, regardless of the reason why the leader said adjourned, when uttering those words, their brain must first have generated a behavioral G-wave for speaking that sentence. This G-wave necessarily contains the phonetic feature structure of the words adjourned. The, the phonetic feature structure of adjourned must come from the activation of the phonetic G for those words. The activation of the phonetic G can occur in three ways: activation by existing G waves in the brain, activation by sensory G wave input, or in rare cases, spontaneous activation of the phonetic G. In the case of activation by existing G waves, if the leader's brain contains G waves related to the meaning of adjourned, it is likely to activate the phonetic G, thereby increasing the probability that the phonetic G wave will be incorporated into the behavioral G wave that prompts speech. The more stronger and more accurate the G waves related to the meaning of adjourned, the higher the probability that the phonetic G will be activated and participate in the combination of behavioral G waves. For example, if the leader admires a female celebrity who is attending another meeting and will come to the opening ceremony immediately after her meeting adjourns, his mind must be filled with the desire for her meeting to adjourn, making it easier for him to sleep and say adjourned. Alternative, Alternatively, if he thinks the end of this conference will mark a new milestone, he might also sleep and say adjourn. These are cases where existing G waves in the brain activate the phonetic G. Note that in these cases, the G waves related to the meaning of adjourned do not necessarily appear in the G wave display area. In other words, his thoughts about the female celebrity or the milestone beginning can be entirely subconscious. In the case of activation by sensory G wave input, if the leader is reading the opening speech absent, absent-mindedly but pretending to follow the script, and the last line of the script is, I now declare the meeting adjourned, it is natural for him to make the leap. As for the spontaneous activation of the phonetic G, this is relatively rare. For example, if the leader has frequently encountered the words adjourned recently, or if adjourned has become a catchphrase for him. The phonetic G for agenda will be stronger, making simultaneous activation possible. Additionally, simultaneous activation of the phonetic G is more common in individuals with mental disorders or children, often manifesting as confused speech. Once a verbal slip occurs, the speaker often corrects it immediately. For example, the leader who said adjourn might immediately correct himself with, I mean, I declare the opening. the opening. This reflects the dynamic monitoring of one's own behavior, which is part of the response to environmental feedback. The verbal slip itself is pronounced and output the environment by the behavioral G wave, thus becoming part of the current environment. This part of the current environment is then translated back into sensory G waves and re-input into the central nervous system. Typically, in the case in the case of a verbal slip, the corresponding semantic G is activated, but the observed phonetic G is not effectively activated. Instead, due to the reason mentioned above, other phonetic G are activated. For example, the leader intended to activate the phonetic G for opening but instead activated the phonetic G of adjourned. So what happens when the environmental G wave containing the slip is imported back into the speaker's brain? First, this environmental G wave is an auditory G wave. Upon input, it firstly activates a series of phonetic G's corresponding to the slip, which is in turn activates the semantic G's corresponding to these phonetic G's, forming a semantic G wave containing the content of the slip. When this semantic G wave is presented is, pres- is presented in the G wave display area, the leader realizes what he said. Next, the leader corrects himself, meaning the phonetic G for opening, which should have been activated, is activated. What is the mechanism behind this? Generally, when a person makes a verbal slip while reading aloud, the probability of correcting it is low. However, when conversing with others or addressing an audience, the probability of immediate correcting a slip upon realizing it is much higher. Moreover, the intensity of the corresponding behavior is often greater than that of the slip itself. For example, the leader might emphasize opening more strongly or even repeat it. Why is this? When the content of the slip is realized, meaning the slip G wave is projected into the G wave display area, this G wave will be further projected. If we consider the original G wave containing the meaning of opening as the expected G wave, then the slip G wave represents a lack of feedback for the original expectation. This lack of feedback manifests as the failure to fulfill the original expectation of seeing opening. So the original expected G may continue to extend its influence. Additionally, this state of insufficient activation of the G wave will also activate the experimental cognitive G related to errors. In an environment with an audience, the cognition of the current error may activate instinctive G's related to stress and social interest G related to communication. These G's undoubtedly have connections with pleasure or discomfort sub-G, making it more likely for the reason or for the person to exhibit corrective behavior. All right. That's the all content today. Are you confused? Okay, see you next time. Bye bye.